Imagine living in a world where moments of normalcy, like eating a hamburger or drinking a cold beer, coexist with the ever-present sounds of artillery fire and explosions just miles away. This was the reality for American soldiers in Vietnam, and today I'm going to take you through those daily experiences as seen through the eyes of my step-grandpa, Roger Lee Perry. Using his personal letters, photos, and even a video from his time in Vietnam, we'll explore the unique challenges and emotional toll of war, going beyond the front lines to understand the deeper, often overlooked aspects of military life. To quote my grandma, as I interviewed her for this project, Roger was one like the rest of them, just trying to get through it one day at a time. He wasn't one to talk much about the war, even later in life, but through his letters, photos, and stories that she's passed down, even that video of his time in Vietnam, we're able to get glimpses of what he really experienced there, not just the physical realities, but also the emotional weight that he carried with him. So by reading these letters that he wrote his mother, Lillian, while in Vietnam, I was able to see the difficult balance many soldiers had to face between navigating their lives at home and the conflict they were immediately in. While he received happy news, like the fact that he was going to become an uncle for the first time, he also dealt with some family drama. He had to diffuse a situation, which is crazy to think he was diffusing personal issues at home while also dealing with war, like combat firsthand. In the letters, he also spoke of the climate, which is one of the many culture shocks American soldiers often experience there. He even emphasized to my grandma how bad the rain was. He said it rained it felt like 90% of the time. It was so bad that soldiers often developed foot rot from standing in their wet boots for too long. And in almost every single letter that I read that he sent his mother, he was just counting the days until he could go home. He rarely talked about anything traumatic. He didn't want to relive what he'd been through. Like so many American veterans of the Vietnam War, he carried those memories silently, buried deep beneath the surface. Even long after the war, when he was married to my grandma, he never really opened up about what happened over there. That silence was not unique to him. It was a very common way veterans coped with the weight of their experiences. And in that silence, you can see just how deeply the war stayed with all of these veterans. While many of his memories were traumatic, he shared many glimpses into what life was like, just experiencing the culture shock and adapting to the environment, which was very exotic compared to what soldiers were used to back in America. One interesting example of this is that I guess he said their unit had a pet elephant, and they have a picture of this, and the elephant is so cute. I wish I knew what its name was. I guess they led it around by its ear. That's really all I know about it, but I just love that we have a picture of this. Another story is one my grandma just told me about. One night, I guess he was on guard duty. It was dark outside, and through the tall grass, he sees these glowing eyes just staring right at him. At that point, he fired his gun on what turned out to be a cobra. He also told her about this snake, I guess, that was over there. I'm not sure if he ever saw it or if he just heard about it. Called the two-step snake, and supposedly if it bit you, you would not take more than 2 steps before dying. That's how poisonous it was. Roger also told my grandma about the kinds of food he ate while he was there. Once he unknowingly ate a burger made out of dog meat. He also said that they ate cat and rat meat. For many of the Vietnamese people he encountered, especially in these rural mountain areas, this was pretty normal. They were poor and food was food. It gives us a deeper understanding of how survival looked different depending on where you were and who you were. We were kind of talking about this, like, I feel like a lot of people would be just absolutely disgusted by this in our culture, but when you think about it, like, my grandparents ate very strange animals, what would seem very strange to some people, because they were very poor. My family would eat, like, possum, raccoons, squirrel, rabbit, tons of stuff. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I know a lot of people might be bothered by that, but you have to understand, like, that's what they could find, and that's what they ate. Thankfully, he didn't see as much combat as many other soldiers did. He mostly drove a delivery truck. Even so, he endured lifelong trauma from the combat he was involved in there and the things he witnessed. Years after his time in Vietnam, when he was married to my grandma, he experienced PTSD, particularly involving sleepwalking episodes where he often dreamt he was back in Vietnam. And this is reflected really well in a study done in 2016 by Habibullah Qazi, where research is presented on how post-traumatic stress disorder affects sleep in military veterans with a focus on disorders like insomnia, parasomnias, and movement-related disturbances. My grandpa's one of many examples of this. One day he was like sitting in the living room talking to his wife and kids. Everything was normal, and all of a sudden he just disappeared. He just got up and walked out, and they did not realize anything was wrong. After a while, they were like, where did he go? They got up and started looking for him. They looked for him for about 20 minutes when around that time he emerged from the cornfield next to their house and told them he had been in a sleepwalking episode, and he thought he had dozed off while just sitting there talking to him, and he sleepwalked out of the house into the field, thought he was on guard duty back in Vietnam. Another time he jumped out of bed in the middle of the night and began ripping the curtains off the bedroom window in a panic. I guess he thought they were on fire. There were other times he sleepwalked into the yard in the middle of the night thinking he was in active combat. And this is something that he experienced on multiple occasions throughout the year. And he didn't even fight in the front lines every day. Even so, Vietnam left a permanent mark on him, obviously. It affected his sleep, his mind, probably even his heart. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he passed away from, I think, a heart attack. If he didn't, I know he at least had really bad heart problems. I've realized that the psychological toll of war doesn't just come from combat. It comes from the waiting, the fear, the loneliness, and the loss of normal life. Roger, like many others, kept most of that bottled up. A quote by Colonel Keith Nightingale, a retired U.S. Army officer and Vietnam War veteran, known best for his first-hand accounts of combat and deep insights into the long-term effect of war on soldiers, comes to mind when I view Roger's Vietnam video and photos. And that quote goes, "You could often see in the horizon flares going off. You could hear the artillery. We were eating hamburgers and drinking cold beer, knowing that 10 miles out in that direction, people were getting killed." Hence my introduction to this video. This is the surreal contrast many American soldiers experienced in Vietnam, moments of normalcy and comfort existing right alongside the chaos of war. While stationed at more secure bases, soldiers could eat, drink, and rest, yet they were constantly reminded of the violence just miles away through sounds of artillery and flares lighting up the sky. It was like living in two worlds at once, which added to the psychological strain, knowing that safety was temporary and arbitrary, and that others nearby were in constant danger or dying, and for all they knew, they could be next. Roger also captured photos of Vietnamese citizens reflecting their daily interactions. These interactions were complex and emotionally charged. On one hand, moments of connection like a shared smile, a friendly gesture, or seeing children play. There are many pictures of children, actually. These offer brief glimpses of humanity and normalcy amid the war. On the other hand, both parties were obviously on edge, unsure of who could be trusted. Viet Cong fighters often blended in with the civilians. This mix of warmth and suspicion created emotional tension, making those peaceful encounters both comforting and haunting. So that's pretty much all I have. Thank you so much for listening to my Grandpa Roger's story. All of this information was taken from his personal letters, photos, and a video I have of him during the war. Additional insights were provided through conversations with my grandma, Regina Ann Strothman, listening to the Cold War Conversations podcast with Colonel Keith Nightingale, and reading the research of Kazi, who discussed lasting effects of PTSD and sleep disturbances on veterans. Roger's story serves as a powerful reminder of the complex and lasting effects of war on veterans, especially in the unseen struggles of PTSD and sleep disorders. By exploring his personal experiences alongside expert insights and research, we can gain a deeper understanding of the emotional and psychological challenges faced by those who served. Their stories continue to be a vital part of our collective history and remind us of the importance of supporting veterans in their journey to heal.